The stars above Earth shimmered as an unnatural distortion rippled through the void. A rift in space twisted open, and out poured the Zalzir fleet, colossal warships, each the size of entire cities, their black, chitinous hulls reflecting nothing but the cold emptiness of space. The invasion had begun. Their flagship, the Maw of Dominion, hung above Earth's atmosphere like an omen. Then came the transmission across every screen, every frequency, every device. The voice was deep, reverberating, laced with condescension and absolute certainty. Humans, it began. I am High Commander Zithrak of the Zalzir Dominion. We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy. Your species, weak and divided, has been chosen for assimilation. On every continent, in every city, billions listened. The holographic form of Zithrak, towering and armored in dark organic plating, observed the gathered leaders of Earth with something bordering amusement. Surrender, he continued. Kneel, and you will be permitted to live under our rule. Resist, and your world will burn as others have before you. Images flashed across the transmission. Planets reduced to husks, their civilizations wiped from existence. The Zalzir had done this before, many times, and every species had broken before them. Silence followed. Then, a single response. A woman stood among the world's leaders, General Catherine Vasquez, head of Earth's combined military command. She stepped forward, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was steady. No. Zithrak tilted his head. You misunderstand, human. Vasquez's expression did not change. No. You misunderstand. Come and take it. For the first time in his long, conquering existence, Zithrak hesitated. There was no begging, no negotiating, no desperate pleas for mercy, just defiance. Then the broadcast cut. The Zalzir did not bother with further warnings. The first wave descended, their drop ships cutting through the sky like falling meteors. They landed in New York, Beijing, London, Tokyo, Johannesburg, Rio, Sydney, every major city. Armored warriors, 8 feet tall, encased in exoskeletal plating, stepped onto human soil. Their plasma lances glowed. And yet the streets were empty. A flicker of confusion passed through the alien ranks. Their forces advanced cautiously. Then the first trap was sprung. From the rooftops, hidden drones activated, releasing high-frequency electromagnetic pulses. The Zalzir's shields flickered, then died. Their comms failed. Then the snipers opened fire. Bullets, armor-piercing, uranium-tipped, tore through exposed joints, dropping the first wave of soldiers. From the alleys, guerrilla teams emerged, unleashing a storm of rockets and gunfire. The Zalzir, caught off guard, stumbled, fell, died. This was not an open battlefield. This was a slaughter. Zithrak watched the footage in real time aboard the Maw of Dominion. His mandibles tightened. This was not how it was supposed to go. The first wave of Zalzir warriors had been decimated, their towering bodies lying twisted in the streets. Their invasion force, confident in a swift victory, now found itself struggling against an enemy unlike any they had faced before. They adapted, deployed countermeasures. The second wave landed, this time with shielding resistant to the EMP strikes, their formations tighter. They advanced with caution, scanning every building, every shadow, expecting more ambushes. But humanity did not fight conventionally. In Beijing, entire city blocks had been rigged with high-powered explosives, disguised beneath debris. The Zalzir advanced, their scans picking up nothing, until they stepped forward, and the ground itself erupted beneath them. Skyscrapers, wired to collapse, came down in a controlled detonation, burying thousands of their warriors alive. In Berlin, they jammed the Zalzir's command frequencies, cutting off their ability to coordinate, hacked their systems, fed them false data, fake human strongholds that didn't exist, decoy distress signals that lured them into deadly crossfires. In Chicago, the resistance had taken their weapons. Plasma lances, scavenged from fallen Zalzir soldiers, had been reverse-engineered within hours. Modified, improved. Now, human guerrilla fighters wielded alien firepower, striking from underground tunnels before vanishing like ghosts. The The Zalzir began to realize something terrifying humans learned. Every encounter, every battle, every ambush, we adapted. Zithrak watched the reports pour in. Casualty numbers rising. Entire units missing in action. For the first time in his empire's history, an invasion had not only stalled, it was losing ground. He snarled, mandibles clicking in frustration. This was impossible. On Earth, the psychological warfare had begun. Human forces left holographic soldiers in abandoned buildings. Zalzir would enter, believing they had cornered survivors, only for the projections to flicker away as real snipers picked them off. They used sound manipulation. Strange, disorienting frequencies broadcast through the city streets, interfering with the Zalzir's heightened senses, making them feel like prey. And then came the whispers. Captured Zalzir soldiers were broadcast live across the galaxy. Not tortured, not broken, laughing, mocking their captors, daring them to send more. The galaxy watched, stunned. No species had ever responded like this. No species had ever rejected surrender so utterly. And then humanity did something even worse. They counterattacked. In orbit, Earth's remaining defense satellites had been retrofitted. Instead of missile systems, they now carried boarding pods. Against all logic, human strike teams launched themselves directly at Zalzir warships. They landed on hulls, cut through with industrial plasma torches, breached ships from the outside in turning the invaders' own vessels into death traps. Zithrak could only watch, speechless, as the first Zalzir warship fell silent. Then another. Then another. Earth wasn't fighting for survival. It was hunting them. Captured Zalzir warships were stripped apart within hours of falling into human hands. Scientists, engineers, and hackers worked in tandem, tearing through alien systems, decoding their language, repurposing their own technology against them. What should have taken years of research, humanity accomplished in days. Zalzir energy weapons were unstable. Their shielding had gaps when under strain. Their communication systems lacked proper encryption. Every weakness was exploited. Within a week, human pilots were flying Zalzir dropships, bypassing enemy patrols, inserting elite squads deep into their lines. A species that had never lost a war was now being outmaneuvered with its own ships. On the ground, resistance forces had mastered guerrilla warfare. They stopped fighting battles on the aliens' terms. Hit-and-run strikes, booby-trapped terrain, false retreats, psychological pressure. The Zalzir were an army built for overwhelming force, not for chaos. They crumbled under chaos. Zithrak had underestimated them. But what came next shattered his understanding of warfare. The humans began launching counteroffensives, not just on Earth but in space. A stolen Zalzir cruiser, piloted by a rogue human strike team, crashed directly into a Zalzir command station orbiting Mars. The resulting explosion wiped out an entire fleet division. Asteroids were hollowed out, filled with warheads, and hurled at enemy formations. They couldn't be detected as artificial. They looked like natural space debris. Until they hit. On the ground, Zalzir morale collapsed. Entire units surrendered. Not because they were losing soldiers, but because they were terrified. No species had ever fought like this. No species had ever enjoyed war. Captured Zalzir commanders reported the same nightmare. Humans didn't just fight back. They laughed. They laughed while under siege. They laughed while bleeding out. They laughed while detonating bombs with themselves still inside. One Zalzir officer, his mandibles trembling, whispered his final report. They are not afraid to die. They are not afraid of us. They enjoy this. Zithrak's advisors demanded retreat. The invasion was a failure. The longer they stayed, the worse it would become. But he refused. Pride, rage, desperation. He had never lost a war. And then, in the dead of night, the final blow came. Human forces had infiltrated the Maw of Dominion. A task force. Small, elite, suicidal. Had breached the flagship. They moved fast, cutting through security, plunging Earth's flag into the Zalzir war room. By the time Zithrak's guards responded, it was already too late. Earth's forces had control of the ship's weapons. and they had one message: surrender, or we glass your own fleet. For the first time in Zalzir history, a high commander hesitated. Zithrak's mandibles twitched in rage. The very idea of surrender was unthinkable. The Zalzir Dominion had never yielded, never retreated, never faced an enemy that forced them to reconsider their own supremacy. And yet, as he stood in the shattered war room of his own flagship, surrounded by the corpses of his best warriors, he felt something foreign: uncertainty. The humans stood before him, bloodied but grinning. Their leader, General Vasquez, still holding her rifle, tilted her head. "Well?" she asked. Clocks ticking. Every instinct screamed at him to fight to the last, to activate the fleet's failsafe, to scorch Earth from orbit in a final, bitter act of defiance. But his claws hesitated over the console. Humanity had infiltrated his ship. His ship. They had taken his weapons. They had shattered his forces not just through brute strength, but through something worse: ingenuity, adaptability, and an almost pathological refusal to accept defeat. And the worst part? They were enjoying it. He had seen the reports. Humans who had never fought before picking up weapons, outmaneuvering trained Zalzir soldiers, laughing in the face of death, celebrating destruction as if it were a game. The Zalzir had assumed Earth's resistance would follow the pattern of every other species: terror, capitulation, submission. But they hadn't accounted for one truth about humanity: they didn't break. They got meaner. Zithrak exhaled sharply. If he ordered his forces to keep fighting, they wouldn't just lose. They would be hunted down to the last. This wasn't just another conquered planet. This was a trap that he had willingly walked into. He turned his gaze to Vasquez. Even now, surrounded by alien corpses, coated in blood and grime, she didn't look desperate. She looked satisfied. "You have two options," she continued. "Leave and tell the rest of your dominion what happened here. Or stay and see what happens when humanity stops playing with its food." Zithrak's mandibles clicked together slowly. He thought of the countless species he had enslaved, the civilizations wiped out under his command. The galaxy feared the Zalzir. But as he looked at Vasquez, as he looked at the humans who had boarded his ship and ripped apart his fleet, he realized a far more horrifying truth. The galaxy had been afraid of the wrong species. His claws clenched. Slowly, reluctantly, he activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice, for the first time in his life, held no arrogance, no certainty. "All Zalzir forces," he growled. "Stand down." The words felt poisonous. But as the transmission spread across the battlefield, silence followed. The Zalzir, once so confident in their conquest, dropped their weapons. Warships disengaged. The invasion fleet began to withdraw. The war was over. But as Zithrak prepared to leave, he made the mistake of looking back. He saw Vasquez watching him. Not with relief, not with gratitude, with anticipation. And in that moment he knew, this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The Zalzir fleet limped away from Earth, their once mighty warships trailing smoke, their forces humiliated. The humans hadn't just repelled an invasion, they had turned it into a warning, a declaration. Humanity was not to be conquered. On board the retreating flagship, Zithrak sat in silence, mandibles grinding against each other in frustration. His forces had been shattered, his soldiers demoralized beyond repair. No reports came in. No one dared speak. The entire Dominion was waiting for his explanation, his justification for the first loss in their history. But what could he say? That humans were something else? That they fought like cornered predators with nothing to lose? That they took pleasure in destroying their enemies, in learning their weaknesses, in breaking them piece by piece? No, the Dominion would never accept it. He barely accepted it himself. And yet the images haunted him. Human boarding teams, laughing as they breached Zalzir ships. Snipers whispering taunts as they picked off his soldiers one by one. Captured warriors speaking in hushed, broken voices, warning their own kind that there was no victory to be had. The Dominion had never feared anything before. Now fear had a name. And then the final insult came. A transmission intercepted on all Zalzir channels. A message short and simple. Not a surrender, not a plea, but a challenge. Vasquez's voice, steady and clear. Come back any time. The bridge fell silent. Zithrak's claws tightened around his throne. The humans had won, and instead of gloating, instead of bargaining for peace, they had invited war. Dared the Dominion to try again. It was madness. No species wanted war. No species enjoyed it. Except them. The Dominion had two choices now. Accept the loss and abandon Earth. Admit that the humans had done what no one else had. Or return, and risk extinction. Zithrak knew the Council would demand revenge. His advisors would demand retaliation. But he had seen the truth. Humanity wasn't fighting for survival. They were waiting for the next fight. And the worst part? They were looking forward to it.